Today, I'm showing you step by step how to create this stunning raspberry vanilla cake. I'll walk you through my entire cake design and recipe development process for creating a perfectly balanced raspberry vanilla cake and how I created this elegant cake design. My name is Louise and I'm a self-taught cake artist and recipe developer. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create the most outstanding raspberry vanilla cake. I decided to make this cake after asking you guys what summer recipe you would like, and you voted for something with raspberry. So I ended up making a cake packed with a lot of raspberries, perfectly balanced with vanilla and also a bit of white chocolate, making this into the ultimate raspberry and vanilla cake. I'm going to show you the process behind developing this cake recipe, my thoughts behind creating a perfectly balanced vanilla and raspberry cake, and how to think like a pastry chef when balancing sweetness, acidity, and texture. And if you want to bake the cake at home, you can find the full recipe here on my website, which you can access with a subscription. To make this cake, I'm also going to show you how to master the following techniques. How to make a fudgy and fresh blondie with raspberry, a crispy vanilla and feuilletine crunch layer, a fudgy raspberry ganache, a smooth pastry cream, a creamy raspberry marmalade, an airy raspberry and vanilla mousse, and a shiny mirror glaze. I'm going to show you how to make the following layers: blondie with white chocolate and raspberry, vanilla feuilletine crunch layer, raspberry ganache, pastry cream, raspberry marmalade, raspberry and vanilla mousse, velvet spray, and mirror glaze. If you want to learn more about how to make elegant, layered, and delicious Entremet cakes, you can now check out my online course, Master Entremet Cakes at Home, where I show you how to create professional quality cakes from start to finish, right from your own kitchen. Inside the course, I teach you my 5-step formula that I use for all my cakes: cake base, crunch, creamy element, mousse, and decoration. You'll also learn how to make 5 of my signature Entremet cakes, different glazing techniques, discover recipe development and cake design, and also receive PDF troubleshooting guides and Excel recipe course material, giving you everything you need to start creating your own cakes at home. Alright, let's get started! To make this raspberry vanilla cake, I wanted to start out by making a fudgy cake base. Here, I decided to make a white chocolate blondie with raspberries, as I think white chocolate pairs perfectly with raspberry. I start out by melting butter, then adding white chocolate that is then melted in the butter. The next step is to whisk eggs, sugar, flour, and salt until the batter has a lighter and more airy texture, before mixing in the butter/chocolate mixture and a bit of fresh lemon zest to add a bit of fresh twist to the cake. Lastly, I stir in chopped white chocolate for a bit of more chocolate flavor and pour the batter in a pastry ring. I add frozen raspberries and bake the cake for 22 to 27 minutes at 180 degrees until the cake is golden and set in the middle. Once the cake has cooled off, I put it in a clean pastry ring, level the surface, and put it in the fridge while preparing the next layer. For the crunch layer, I wanted this to have a prominent vanilla flavor to complement the raspberry blondie, which is why I'm here making a vanilla crunch layer. I also wanted to add just a bit of flavor contrast in this element, which is why this layer also contains notes of caramel with a bit of biscuit cream. To make the crunch, I start out by cutting the vanilla bean, scraping out the seeds and putting it aside. Then I melt white chocolate in a small pot, remove it from the heat and mix in feuilletine, biscuit cream, vanilla seeds and salt before combining all the elements. I spread the crunch on top of the blondie, level the surface with a glass and a spoon, and put the cake in the freezer while preparing the next layer. To add a velvety texture to the cake, I'm here making a raspberry ganache. This ganache is a mix of white chocolate and raspberry to create a perfectly balanced ganache. The first step is to melt white chocolate and pour it in a bowl. Then I heat heavy cream and raspberry puree almost to a boil before pouring it over the white chocolate while stirring in the middle with a spatula. Lastly, I hand blend the ganache to get a fully creamy consistency. Using an immersion hand blender here is really the key, as it creates a super silky texture and helps emulsify the fats for a smooth finish. I then pour the ganache onto the set crunch layer and put the cake back in the freezer while the ganache needs to set before the next layer can be added. To get the ultimate vanilla taste into this cake, I decided to make a layer with the most amazing pastry cream. The tricky thing about this layer is that a pastry cream normally seizes upon defrosting, so the process of making the cream in the right way is really essential in order to make a creamy pastry cream that doesn't seize after defrosting. I make the cream by whisking egg yolks, cornstarch, sugar and whole milk together in a bowl. Then I heat whole milk, vanilla pods and vanilla seeds almost to a boil before pouring the hot milk over the egg mixture. Then the mixture goes back in the pot where I heat it while whisking until it thickens. We'll now strain the cream and mix in soaked gelatin and butter, which will help set the cream inside the Entremet cake. Then the cream needs to set and cool to lukewarm before I can add heavy cream. The heavy cream and gelatin is really what prevents the cream from seizing and giving it a creamy texture even after defrosting. After the cream has set, I whip it to a creamy consistency with a hand whisker before spreading the cream on top of the cake. Then the cream needs to set in the freezer before we can add the next layer. Now that we have several layers focusing on a prominent vanilla flavor, I wanted to add something that brings the most pure raspberry flavor. I therefore decided to make a raspberry marmalade. Here we start out by boiling frozen raspberries, sugar and vanilla paste and cook until tender. I then add pectin mixed with a bit of sugar, while the pectin ensures that the marmalade thickens and isn't too fluid, and boil the mixture. After boiling the mixture, I take the pot off the heat, add soaked gelatin to set the marmalade further. The marmalade now needs to cool to room temperature, as it otherwise is too hot to pour onto the cake before I can spread it on top of the set pastry cream. Then the cake needs to freeze fully overnight. For the last cake element, I wanted to include a layer that mainly focused on a raspberry flavor, but also still having a hint of vanilla. I was debating whether to make this mousse with or without chocolate, but I decided in the end to add white chocolate to balance the raspberry flavor just a bit, as the raspberry jam and raspberries in the Blondie cake already does add a lot of pure raspberry flavor to the cake. I make the mousse by first melting white chocolate and pouring it in a bowl. I then cut the vanilla beans and scrape out the seeds before heating heavy cream, raspberry puree and vanilla seeds almost to a boil before I stir in soaked gelatin. We can now pour the mixture over the white chocolate, where I stir in the middle to get an incorporated glossy texture. After the chocolate/raspberry mixture has cooled off, I whip heavy cream to a lightly wet foam with soft peaks and fold it into the raspberry vanilla mixture. We then pour the mousse in a silicone mold lined with acetate sheet and put in the frozen cake with the marmalade facing downwards. Then the cake needs to freeze fully overnight. For this cake design, I wanted to create a look that visually represented both raspberry and vanilla. I therefore decided to split the top of the cake into two parts, where one side is covered with white velvet spray and the other side is covered by a pink mirror glaze. Not only does this color-wise highlight the two flavor profiles, but the velvety and matte finish from the velvet spray is also a great contrast to the pink shiny mirror glaze. I make the glaze by first putting chopped white chocolate in a tall jug. I then soak gelatin cheese in cold water and put it aside while preparing the syrup. In a pot, I'm heating glucose syrup, sugar, water and heavy cream almost to a boil, whisking in soaked gelatin before pouring it over the white chocolate. I mix with an immersion hand blender, add pink food coloring paste and mix again. Then the glaze needs to cool to 34 to 35 degrees before we can glaze the cake. I place the fully frozen cake on a baking cooling rack and spray around half of the cake with the white velvet spray. And pour the 34 to 35 hot glaze over the other half of the cake. And then we are ready to add the final touch. Now, to decorate the middle of the cake, I wanted to go with a very floral look and a mostly pink color scheme, which is why I'm decorating the middle of the cake with different pink flowers and also a bit of white flowers. I'm making sure to add safety seal on all flowers, where I use different shades and shapes of flowers to add some visual contrast and composition. And here we have the final cake that I think looks stunning. I really love this simple yet elegant cake design that visually represents the raspberry and vanilla flavor inside, and this cake truly is a perfect mix of raspberry and vanilla. So good. To me, this really is the ultimate raspberry and vanilla cake. The flavors are just perfectly balanced. We have lots of raspberry, but also perfectly balanced with the vanilla and also some white chocolate to really balance the acidity with also some sweetness. I hope you get the chance to make this outstanding raspberry cake at home. And if you like my videos, make sure to subscribe. You can also check out my Entremet cake playlist here. See you in the next video.